Hello, my name is John Visitation. This is my podcast called The Media of Things. Here we're going to go ahead and talk about esports, video games, events happening in esports, what makes esports, people's experiences. I'll have guests and co hosts help me talk about articles that come up. I'll be doing some fun quizzes with the guests, and I hope you'll have a good time and learn a couple things about the new scene that's popping up. So, I wanted to start this pilot episode with a couple things about me, my experiences through esports, my journey, if you will, the video games that I focused on, a brief explanation on the topics that I'll be talking about, and then I'm going to go ahead and jump and talk about three articles today regarding esports. I think that talking about esports today will really help the prior generation or the last generations understand what's up with the tech scene, how it influences this so-called esports, and how the growth of esports will continue on, and how it's progressed until today, and especially with COVID nowadays, uh, it would create great talking points, great insights into what could possibly be, what can't be, what has been about video games and esports, their relationship, and our relationship to that. So, talking about me right now, uh, I started playing video games when I was a lot younger. I feel like my generation, the 99ers or the 2000 kids, all remember the handheld consoles when we were younger. Pokemon, Digimon, Mario, all those games being on like a Game Boy Advance or a Game Boy Color. Geesh, that was such a long time ago, huh? I think my first handheld console I had Super Mario Bros. We bought it from PC Richards and Son. I remember vividly. It was a gray and black Game Boy. Uh, I bring it everywhere with me. I also remember losing it and my parents having to buy another one back in the day. I think I went through three of them. I went through a black and gray one, a red one, and a blue one. And then the first game I really got into was Pokemon. I think it was Pokemon Red. It was in one of those really big cartridges for the Game Boy Color. If you guys forget how the Game Boy Color looks, by the way, the Game Boy Color was a brick. There's the Game Boy SP, which is like an actual brick, and then there's the Game Boy SP Color, which was more of a square. The original Game Boy Color was a rectangle, and the second one was a foldable square. Um, and after that, I started to have a passion for single player games. So I had moved from Pokemon to Mario to Yu-Gi-Oh spin-offs. Wow, a lot of Japanese names there. Let's see. Final Fantasy was a really big thing for me. And then I think from third grade, um, no, first grade. From first grade, I was stuck on all those games. I absolutely adored them. And then I think third grade, 2006 ish, 6 to 8 ish, is when the Nintendo DS came out. A DS for duo screens. And that's when it was a turning point because all of a sudden you can connect to the internet. And I feel like this is where a lot of esports started. If you look at the history of esports, though, it's not really where I started. In fact, it's a lot older than you think it would be. Counter Strike Source was a '90s title, oddly enough. Not a lot of the people from the '90s know it, but there was actually a growing scene. I know personally, talking to a couple of people in the scene when I was at local lands, that CS Source and 1.6, they'd call them Counter Strike Source and Counter Strike 1.6. They were huge, they were massive. Not only here in the US, but they were also massive over across seas. Not only that, games like Halo and COD have started to rise since the first Xbox implementation, and since the actual, I guess, PlayStation as well with fighting games. Smash was huge as well. Those games we'll also be talking about later on in the podcast. I'll be bringing on some friends who are rather good. Hopefully, I could pull on some NJIT, which is the college I go to. Some NJIT esports people as well. If all goes along plans, I plan to introduce some other people. So where was I? Yeah. So for Pokemon on the Nintendo DS, it's one of the first implementations on the DS actually to connect online and play with friends. This was also possible with games like Mario Kart, which is huge back in my day. Sheesh. Back in my day, makes me feel rather odd and rather old, to be honest. Um, Gosh, I feel like I'm gonna be saying that a lot with a lot of the guests here, looking back in my day. Oh my. Um, so after the implementation on online on handheld, I feel like internet games have started to really take off. The ability to play with your friends without being next to your friends is one of the biggest things, right? So there was the Halo scene, the COD scene, the fighting game scene. So there is I don't think BlazBlue was created yet, but I know Smash is made. Brawl was made later on with the Wii. Wii was another thing that came along oddly enough. There was never a competitive scene for esports, but there was sure as hell local competitiveness, especially with bowling. For some people, people really love the bowling, and people really love the Wii tennis. I love them myself as well. Um, so yeah. So going from there, I haven't even had my first computer yet. Thinking about it. So for Pokemon, I did participate in a couple of tournaments when I was younger. There was a tournament back in 2011 at Toys R Us, at our local Toys R Us, and if you won a new Nintendo DS for free. You won like an event Pokemon, which is a limited edition. You get a certain move set. You get a little ribbon on your Pokemon telling them, hey, you attended this one. And if you won, you get bragging rights and stuff. And I guess that was really my first experience at a LAN. Really, it was really intimidating because as a kid you realize that you're not the only one playing a video game. You see a ton of adults playing as well. It's intriguing how all ages can participate, and I think that's a special thing about esports. Um, Anyone can play. It doesn't matter gender, age, um, physical ailment. You could all end up playing and enjoying the same thing, and all hold a passion for it. It's beautiful, really, experiencing it. At the Pokemon Land, actually, I made a lifelong friend. His name was Jose. Um, Gosh, I remember this guy had the first implementation of the DS. So the DS went through a couple implementations. There was the brick one, there was the DS Lite, and they made revisions to the Lite here and there, and then there's special edition ones that came out later. But I remember this guy, he won. And I was my eyes were bawling, man. My competitive spirit wouldn't let me admit that I lost. How's that, right? Kawaii. So, um, and this kid, he saw me and to try and cheer me up, and he was a lot older than me. No, I was like in third, fourth, fifth grade. This kid, I think after talking to him, he was like twice my age. This guy was like in seventh or eighth grade, and he gave me one of his winning Pokemon. So in Pokemon, you have like a 16. You have a six-person team essentially. You have six Pokemon that you use, and you fight 6v6. This kid gave me one of his mons to try and cheer me up, and I was super happy. Uh, if you're out there, Jose, thank you. uh, I hold that uh, I hold that flag on close to my heart. Um, Shout outs to you. And ever since then, I had this competitive spirit. I never ended up winning a Pokemon tournament, oddly enough, because there was a ton of math that went behind it, as I've come to know, which happens with a lot of scenes. The science behind a lot of scenes, how they become competitive, their competitive formula, if you will, are it changes from game to game, and I'll get into that as we talk more and more and more about my past. So after that, we enter middle school, and middle school is where I get my first PC, and it's where I learn how to use WASD, use a mouse. Um, it's really weird though that shift in 2010 to 2013 or 14 was massive because all of a sudden the world started to rely on the internet. People started having personal computers. And therefore, a generation of games came. When back in the day, when you thought PC games, you thought like Minesweeper, you thought like for the people who know R8 games. You thought what else? Minecraft. What else did you think? You thought of an assortment of things, and yet there was no scene to be said. COD and Halo were very much out of the reach of a lot of people. They were for the people in my generation who were 20 years old. Um, now you might call it old or an ancient, but that's just how it was. One of the biggest names out there, actually, now that I remember, was RuneScape. I used to go to the library, download RuneScape on library computers, and play it there. But every single time I went to the library, I'd have to make a new email. I'd have to make a new account for RuneScape, play for 5 minutes because it'd take forever to download on library computers. Um, and it was like ultra intriguing now that I remember. Community computers were really common because not everyone could afford it. I say that now while we're in a GPU shortage. If you didn't know, I'm recording this currently on March. What is today? Today's a Sunday, so March 13, I think. 13, 14. Let me double check that. Yeah, it is March 14. And right now we're going through a GPU shortage. So looking back, it's actually really intriguing how hard technology has advanced, and that's one of the things I plan to talk here about in the podcast. The relationship between hardware, the evolutionary expansion of computers, speed of the internet, how that all relates to a sport that relies on certain gear. Just like how temperature, elevation, location, terrain, how that all changes training in actual, physical sports that you'd use in the Olympics. In the same way, the landscape that we perform esports on also changes how we perform. I think that's a cool parallel to look at. Going back to my story though, before I went off on that tangent. Once again, super competitive when I was younger, and that shift into middle school. Looking at it now, super revealing about the turn of the century, really. Regarding how everyone got computers, and I feel like it started there, especially League of Legends. League of Legends really took off alongside Dota 2 around that time. So that transition brought me to shooter games. I really loved the point and click, getting headshots. I discovered it was fun, and my first game was called Uber Strike. Uber Strike was a lot like Quake. Quake was also a game back in the day that was really big. We call it an arena style PvP. It takes certain skill sets. So there was hit scan, tracking, projectile. Those are 3 different types of aim that you require to play FPS games, and every single genre focuses on all 3. 2 are one of them. Uber Strike required you to have all 3 plus movement, which was super intimidating to someone who had an i3 processor, a wireless mouse, and a wireless keyboard that all had input lag. Looking back, I don't even know how I played on those specs back in the day. And then I discovered this game called Rush Team. Now, at this point, VoIPs were just made. VoIPs are Voice over Internet Protocol. That's what VoIP stands for. And VoIPs, such as TS3, Curse later on in the lifespan, I think. What else are there? Sheesh, I can't even remember. There's so many of these guys lying around the place. I think TeamSpeak was the first VoIP I ever downloaded, and it was through Rush Team that I met online communities. Now, online communities are pretty vital. Their impression on a person can lead a person to stop playing the game, keep playing the game, or even strive to the top. Rush Team is where I actually met a lot of my long life friends that I'm still friends to till this day since 6th grade online. I've never met these people face to face, but I think online relationships have their own place in the world, even though some people have that misconception that online friends aren't anything. I think they are. It's like finding a friend at a club or while you do a hobby. In this case, my hobby was playing video games, and I'm still friends with them till this day. So through Rush Team, I met a couple of lifelong friends, met some really cool people who are now parents. It's insane now that you think about it. Only at the ripe age of 14. And through 10 through 14, yeah. I played Rush Team. I met people like Metalfed. His real name is Jake, I think. There's Perpetron. His real name is Robin, I think. And those guys were already ahead in their life. One of them was a father. The other one was already a middle-aged man living a salary job. Um, and we were all playing games together, just having fun. We're kids, and I was a kid, and those guys were adults, and yet we all enjoy the same thing. That dynamic is really, really cool, and I think it's something that should be looked at. Some people might think it's creepy that middle-aged men play video games with kids, but I don't think so. I think there's a beautiful thing about it that an age difference can play the same game. So through Rush Team, I went ahead and I played. I played online by myself for a lot. When I downloaded the VoIP, I started realizing communities that were made. I met people like Durant and Miss Violet. So I live on the East Coast. I live near New York, and these people I was playing with, they're Canadian, they're Pakistani, they're Russian, they're Somali. Some of them are from Puerto Rico. Some of them are from Brazil. Some of them are from Spain. I played with people all around the world. I even played with this guy from New Zealand. Super, super cool people. It's really, really crazy finding people all across the globe. And this was at a young age, and this was early in the esports scene. So after Rush Team, all my friends downloaded Counter Strike Global Offensive, and this is where my life really, sincerely took a turn, maybe for the worst, according to my parents. After that, I got into Counter Strike. And so, like I mentioned earlier, there are three different ways shooter games can implement a shooting style, right? Hit scan, projectile, and tracking. Now, the biggest thing about it is Counter Strike is a hit scan game. So, what does that mean? So, in the realm of video game creation or game dev, you you learn about these three shooting types or interaction types rather. And hit scan is where if you point and click, it automatically registers. So I see a head, I click on head, register headshot, headshot, die. In the case of projectile, you shoot project object in game or bullet in game takes time to travel to head. Once bullet hits head, then they die. It's not instantaneous like hit scan. And in this case, it's a hit scan game, and it's entirely different than what I was used to, which was a projectile aim game. Sorry. So learning about Counter Strike was hard. I feel like for a lot of games, what we call the skill gap. That's a term you might hear a lot during this podcast. The skill gap was immense. Skill gap refers to the skill set and refinement that you bring to the game from the beginning, as a beginner, to a seasoned vet, essentially. Any game can experience this. For League of Legends, it's learning characters, learning text, and learning lanes. Text as techniques. You're also going to hear that a lot. Strats for strategies. That's another term you're going to hear a lot. Uh, and post game analysis. Those things like will come into talk later. So for Counter Strike, gosh, I played on a laptop back in the day. It was this Asus black laptop, and it would overheat every single time I played Counter Strike. Like overheat. And but gosh, I enjoyed the game. It was fun yelling at your friends or them yelling at you, the comms that went on. The competitive spirit was really there because you want to win. Just to illustrate Counter-Strike really quick, it's a 5v5 tactical shooter. So, tac shooters have very basic shooting mechanics. There might be 1 to 3 twists with the shooting mechanics, but overall, the root core of the game is teamwork. And teamwork is pretty big in TAC 5v5. Might I dare say it's the root. In Counter-Strike specifically, everyone has the exact same running speed, everyone has the exact same shooting mechanics, everyone has the exact same utility. In these games, mean anything that could block rotation, anything that could block sight, anything that can take away sight. Very military-esque based strategy is usually implemented. It's super fun to play. So the me back in the day used to grind Counter-Strike with friends casually. And then I really, really got into it, and I ended up building my own computer. During my second year of high school, I went ahead and I took a part-time job with my godmother. And I was able to get enough money, and I finally built my first computer, which I'm still using today for this podcast. God bless me with a new one coming in. All the parts are coming in right now. I was able to get my brand new RTX 3070. So maybe this will sound different in the future. We'll see what happens. Um, so yeah, I built my new computer, and then I upgraded my display to 144 hertz for that competitive edge. And at this point, after building a computer, I really got interested in trying to make a living out of it, because around this time, which was what, 2016, Counter Strike has hit an all-time high, League has hit an all-time high, Dota has hit an all-time high. Games like PUBG have come out, and professionals were making like $250,000 off of tournaments, no problem. That dream of my hobby becoming a real thing was coming to fruition. The problem is as I'll come to discuss in other podcasts, that where you live heavily changes your entry point into esports. It's sad, but it's the reality. I'll be talking about that with some other people eventually. So keep listening to the podcast if you want to hear my thoughts on some professionals' thoughts or my friends' thoughts on the location and the hubs of esports. So around that time as well, streaming has also begun to take off, and that's another thing I'll be talking about with content creators. Streaming took off, and that's how you're able to see these games flourish. You see a ton of tournaments being held, and hundreds of thousands of people would be online just to watch events. And 2006 was huge for me because that's when I actually attended my first tournament. Not like participating, watching. It was ESL 2016. And I believe it was MLG. ESL and MLG, those were the two big names. Luminosity Gaming versus Liquid was one of the finals, and that was huge. Underdog stories, and that like inspired me so much to give it a shot. So I had this friend, his name was Hyper, Michael. Michael's a bodybuilder now. The guy's sexy AF, as the kids would say. And he showed me this this online tournament called ESEA. And from there, that league really showed me a lot. Number one, that I sucked at the game, and number two, that there's a whole world out there that plays this game. Alright, let's get back into it. So, after discovering ECA, my whole life turned upside down. I started researching videos, getting into my own servers, running practices by myself. And there are a lot of things that changes the mind of a person when it comes to this kind of stuff, your mentality changes entirely. It's incredible. Reading books about how to be better as a person, how to get the most efficient time, and balancing all of this with school was really hard. I went to a really academic intense school. The name of the school was McNair Academic. We would take like 20 more credits than the normal student in our district. Really ridiculous now that you think about it. And throughout my life in high school, I played Counter-Strike, all in an attempt to make it to the top, and I did get my chance. So in ESEA, there are different leagues: open, intermediate. Open, intermediate. ESEA Open is like a meme across Counter-Strike. If you got into open, that just means you got your feet wet. If you got into intermediate, that means you're decent at the game. And there's Pro League, and then there's PUGs. So PUGs is one of the words you're probably going to hear a lot of. Stands for Pickup Games. I went through this in Rush Team 2. It's basically where it's like a closed game. So like I said, in this case it's 5v5. Skin Counter-Strike normally in matchmaking. You just run into random people. But in this case, PUGs are sort of like a community group that does it. And ESEA had their own ranking system. So, you wouldn't get placed with someone who's brand new. So I climbed my way up throughout the years 2016 to 2018. I climbed up from the bottom, which is right around C. I think I started off as a C minus, and I worked my way up to A minus, and I finally touched rank G, which was right before S. So G was where a lot of intermediates would play. I got there, and with my scrimmages. So that's scrim teams are the word scrim. Let's establish this first. Is like for practice matches, just like in regular sports. And then you went ahead and you had the teams on one and all. So the scrim teams. So my scrim team made it pretty big up there, and I think it was around this time I had my first LAN. So LAN tournaments are actually you might not know. So let's go ahead and discuss that. So LAN in networking terms stands for local area network. Essentially, it would be a tournament held not online but in person. Philadelphia, the Delphia part must give it away, right? It's PA. It's a East Coast event. And that was one of my first times ever experiencing like competitive esports on PC. And gosh, I was dumpstered. People destroyed me. Yeah, it's destroyed me and my team on that LAN. You got to meet names that maybe you know nowadays because Valorant's out. I got to meet Braxton Swag Pierce. I got to meet Lasky, Leonardo Lasky. Who else? Gosh, I got to meet Stunna. He was one of the legendary managers for Cloud9, if you know that organization. I got to meet a lot of people there. Really, really cool. And then after that, in high school, me and my scrim team, we were gonna make it to something called the Mountain Dew League that was newly made by ESEA. Unfortunately, that's really where my dream stopped. I was a semi-pro at this point. My earnings in total was around maybe $6,000, $7,000 to $10,000, which is pretty good for a junior or senior in high school. Doesn't have any job experience, focusing on trying to get into college. It was really cool. I thought I saw a dream in it, but my parent, in order to participate in MDL, you'd have to fly all the way to Cali for their LAN. And one of the premier players on my team, one of the star players on my team, couldn't make it. The IGL, the in-game leader for our team, their parents refused to do it, and I talked to my parents, so they didn't like the idea either. So that's really where my dream halted with esports, right there. Yeah, that's the relative end of my esports career, one might say. I was one of the top 15% players on the East Coast. On the West Coast, I have yet to test my skills on that coast, but judging from Philadelphia, those kids, not really kids, those people are insane in the membrane. But that's not really the end of it. Competitive esports still held a grip on me, and I still played I still play until this day. And I've made some countless connections just jumping in and out of the game. For example, they're going to end up being guests here, but I met some other summer pros I've never heard of. Names of Adit, Madman. I met them through PUBG, through this guy named Ubla. And I'm still friends with these guys. These guys are super cool. There are Rainbow Six ex-professionals, and they made it almost as high as I did, but they actually got to stand on a stage, which, I'm really envious of. Who else? So I know my college NJIT, they have an esports team, and I'll be inviting those guys there as well. But as for my story, that's about it. I can give tactical insight. I was an IGL on my scrim team. I was the in-game leader for a little bit, and then I switched to mid-round caller. My job primarily was second mid in support or entry fragger in Counter-Strike. Like I said, my earnings range from around $7,000 to $10,000, which again is pretty decent for someone who doesn't have a lot of job experience. Okay, so that's enough about me. Let's talk about this podcast and what's going to become of it, as this is the pilot episode. So my goal here is to talk about esports, what it's all about, and the cogs that move this machine forward. So I'll be inviting like content creators, ex-pros, current pros, semi or not. One of the dynamics I will hopefully talk about, or some of the topics I'm going to focus on, are like entry points into the esports scene. So collegiate sports, high school sports, women's role in the esports scene. I think this is really big. Mentality, training, those type of things. And for every single game, it's really different. FPS games, fighting games, the strategies, the mentalities, how you get into the scene. Some of the things are similar, some of the things are different, and I think that holds true for regular sports. So let's get into it. One of the first things I want to go ahead and talk about is this article about Luminosity, or sorry, Luminosity. Luminosity's current run in Valorant. So Valorant's a brand new tactical 5v5 that came out, what is it, last summer? Last summer? Sheesh, COVID has really taken a toll on me. It came out during the height of COVID. So last May. I remember. I was still in school when it came out. And it serves to be Riot's answer to Valve. In tactical 5v5s, it was their first shot at a 5v5 tactical shooter. Unlike Counter-Strike, it introduced characters, so classes for people who played COD. In this case, they called them agents. It was pretty big. In order to get in, you'd have to watch a ton of streams and hopefully get a key to get into the beta. After the beta, the game released. And I think, honestly speaking, there's a scene to be grown here. This game is super brand new. It's super baby compared to a legacy title like Counter-Strike that's been here since the 90s. Hopefully they build their legacy. So this article from Daily Esports talks about Immortals is a really rough game, and I actually watched it myself. They really tried their best. Immortals versus Luminosity was the game, and it seems that Luminosity got kicked out of the Masters bracket. So how I believe it is that there's certain tournaments. So they're hosting what we call the ladder step tournament. You go through different stages of tournaments. So there's level 1, 2, 3, 4, you can call it, all the way up to Masters. And I'm assuming they're trying to copy Grand Slams. Really intriguing. So articles like these really highlight an org's outlook on their players, and I think social media has a really big, really big influence on that. Here they go ahead and talk about their wins. So let's talk about win margins and what professional players usually look at. So when you become pro, there are a couple stages you have to do. Number one, you have to be recognized by the community. And I feel like that's a big one, being recognized by the community. How do you get recognized by the community? You play pugs. How do you get into pugs? You join a community. So I guess in reality, through just that conversation, I've come to realize that the first step is really just joining a community. Getting your name out there is really big. So back in the day, you wouldn't need to do much. You wouldn't even need social media. You just need to be a legendary kid who stomped on everyone and everyone goes, whoa, wait, you're really good at the game. Do you want to get paid for it? And nowadays, it's really indifferent. You have different avenues to getting discovered, right? You have avenues such as social media. So TikTok is big. YouTube is huge. Twitter is used a lot as well. I think this showcases like how in Olympic sports you have scouters who come to tournaments, who come to shows, and will judge you. And in this case, for esports, the stage is a lot broader now that I think about it. Twitter, communities, Reddit, all TikTok, all of these places highlight you, and you could spread your name around the place. It's really cool thinking about it that way. All right, so the next article I want to go ahead and talk about is Envy Gaming, because this links into one of the other things that can get you into esports. So one of the other steps to becoming esports professional is getting signed, and getting signed is really hard. There's something I like to call the courting stage in esports. So I got signed to my semi-pro team. Like I said, it took me 2 years, but it takes a lot of time. If you look at the hours logged in for a lot of esports professionals, they take an extremely long time. playing games. And I think this is one of those principles um, that how much time you put in will determine how well off you are in that scene. And they're not wrong. So if you look at the count of these people, they go up from maybe 7,000 hours up, which if you do the map accounts to years, really years of playing, or a lot of months of playing consecutively. And of course, that's not what they actually do. They probably only play 8 times a day. So can you only imagine um, how many days these guys really put into of their life put into these things to get paid for it. And investment in companies are huge. So this article by the Dallas News announces that NV Gaming is putting around 40 million of investment into their esports scene. 40 million, sheesh. That's it's quite a bit. And it's these investments that really help people get out there. Because some teams like collegiate esports is pretty big, and I know my school NGIT has an Overwatch team that's done really well, and our six team that's done really well, and a League of Legends team that's honestly I don't know, but I'll be inviting someone, so we'll be discussing that if you're interested in League of Legends. Stay tuned. Um, so regarding this article, this massive growth in the esports scene is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it. It can now provide a suitable way for people to, make a living. I know Fortnite at the turn of the year 2017, 2017, absolutely massive. 2017 was for Fortnite. Fortnite was played on mobile, on console, and on PC. It was cross-platform. That's the term we're looking for here. It was a cross-platform game, and it allowed people on PC and console to play with people on mobile. So accessible to basically everyone. And the money in that scene was immense. It got a lot of people into esports, and it pointed out to people that esports is a job that you can pursue, just like how in like tabletop sports, for example, we're talking about games like pool or table tennis. Those guys have their own scene. Esports by themselves effectively have their own scene as well, especially with 40 million putting in by one organization. There are a ton of organizations out there that do this kind of stuff. All right, welcome back from the break. So where was I? So I was talking about the exchange of things here and there. We were talking about how the scene was expanding with money being invested. So as people see games like Fortnite, Counter-Strike, COD, even MLG, turn of the century for MLG, Major League Gaming, that stuff really took a turn. Not really for the worst, but took a turn in the economy because people started to realize, oh, if we invest money into the scene, we can get things done. The whole BR scene was actually really big. One of the games, speaking of Fortnite, one of the games that fathered Battle Royales was called H1Z1, next to DayZ, of course. But H1Z1 was the first one to make it sort of an arena title. And H1Z1 led the way to PUBG, and PUBG led the way to Fortnite. Or Apex and Fortnite, really, if I really think about it now. And those titles, if you look them all up, all have their own scene and all have such a big amount of money invested into them. So it doesn't surprise me that NV Gaming went ahead and put 40 million with this investment. For H1Z1, the reason I bring it up was because it was actually televised on Channel 11. And it sort of flunked over time because we're going to talk about this, but to give birth to a scene in esports, there's a magical timing to it, if you will. You need to get lucky with it. You need to get people wanting to play the game. The game needs to be interesting enough to watch, a spectator sport, if you will. And there needs to be money involved, so you get people who are really skilled. Community is also a matter, of course. So to get into esports, so far, what we've discovered is what? You're going to need to... number one, join a community. Number two, get good at the game. Number 3, get scouted. Number 4, continuously perform well in that sport. I don't think there's any sport in the world that will say we'll sign you even though you're garbage at the game. That's not a thing. Oh, sorry. There's a mosquito in my room and I want to kill it. Give me a second.
Yeah, no, life just ain't the real right now. Living in this quarantine as the days go by. I think some things are meant to be with the weight of twine.
All right, welcome back. So, despite things not being said here, the path to being an esports star is really hard, and we're going to discuss this a lot more in this podcast, right? This discussion to be had about the route to take back in the day, now, and probably in the future, how they're like scouting agencies for athletes nowadays. There's definitely going to be scouting agencies now, and it's really funny because it's not only for esports, it's also for content creators. You hear massive names like, let's say, Valkyrae, if you heard of her on Twitch. Who else out there? Shroud started his actual whole empire of being one of the best players in the world when it comes to FPS games. Through esports, he was a Counter-Strike professional. Played for Manajumas when he was a lot younger. I'll get into that with some other pros who probably played against him a ton. And streaming is a platform now that can get you in there. Streaming, referring to platforms like Facebook Gaming, which oddly enough has their own scene in Asia and Europe. There's Twitch, which is massive all around across the board. There's YouTube Gaming, which was Valkyrae, who I mentioned prior, and we're gonna have a guest here who really looks up to her, and is a content creator herself. And that introduction to females in gaming is really big too. Speaking of females in gaming, one of the coolest things I've seen so far is this article on scholarship funds to help women pursue careers in esports. It's called the Broadcaster Academy. And HyperX, who is a manufacturer of computer accessories, so keyboards, mouse, headsets, mics, all of those things, they're funding this, which is really cool. And during the time of COVID, I think this has a place for profit, because if you think about it, everyone's on their computers nowadays because going outside is not advisable. Which, please, people, if you're going outside, I hope everyone's wearing a mask. I hope everyone's staying safe. Those things are really important. Please take it seriously. And by taking it seriously, as a result, you're online listening to this podcast. So thank you. Wow. Good on me. So, times are changing, and the tolerance and acceptance is really big for gaming. And I think this is an all-time high to go ahead and say the following. This podcast will end up focusing on social issues like this in esports. I think it's an important, distinct topic to talk about. I'll be inviting people, women in the scene, and recruiters in the scene, who will hopefully give us insight into why females haven't been highlighted in the scene, and the future of it all. Women's outlook on it, their ideas, their experiences, which is really big. I think one of the ways to fix this is to just listen to experiences on their own. I think honestly will give us a deeper insight, and therefore will give us interesting talking points for you guys to listen to. Hopefully you guys agree and disagree with us, because that's what podcasts are all about. So, this is for a local news. This is a local news article for Las Vegas, I believe. And it's super interesting because they're putting right around maybe 10 million into it. And with the outgoing of jobs, according to the article, a lot of jobs are going out. And so being a gamer has become a pastime for a lot of people. And them noticing that there is a shortage in female players and them encouraging it is really cool to hear about. We're reaching the end of this podcast, and I just want to take a minute to say thank you for listening. The music that was played throughout was made by Mars and Ann, so shout out to them. Again, this is the pilot episode, so please go ahead and let me know in the comments if there are things you would like to be fixed. Leave a drop and subscribe. Leave a like if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you didn't like it. Leave some comments below about ideas that you have, or who should I invite as a guest, or games and topics I should talk about. I have to say, it's actually pretty nerve-wracking talking on the mic like this, but I hope you guys enjoy it. So this is John. This podcast is called The Media Things, where we talk all esports and all content creation on esports. We talk about how you get here, why you're here, what's up with this scene, and why it's worth taking a look at. Again, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate your time. Stay safe. Have a good day.